I became involved with hemp because, I come from a rural community and I live on a farm, and I want to raise my children on the farm, but I also, want my children to have a quality of life that's really hard to achieve on a farm in the type of community that I live in. So, I saw hemp as an opportunity to replace some of the tobacco infrastructure. What happened here in my community was sort of a double-edged sword, right? We had the tobacco buyouts, and then, in the same window period, we had, we had the NAFTA and all the textile production in Kentucky and Appalachia stopped as well. And so you had this dynamic where not only did the farmers lose part of their income, but a lot of the farmers' spouses lost their income. And when you lose income and infrastructure, you lose tax revenue, and schools get larger and consolidated and less funded. And so what I saw with hemp, when it first was presented to me, was an opportunity to replace some of that infrastructure. Here's a crop with a multitude of uses. I live in a community with community members with a multitude of skills that they could apply to transforming this crop. And I've always believed that our food systems need to be more decentralized. And so I saw hemp as sort of a gateway crop, and then secondarily, I think the great thing about it, but also the thing that scares me the most about it, is that it is enticing a lot of new people back to the land. We're in an interesting time, and, regardless of COVID or any of that, I don't say, but prior to that, we were in an interesting time in our food system. So it's exciting to think that people are getting excited about coming back to the farm, and hemp has drawn a lot of young people to the farm. And I guess that's why I became involved with the Hemp Industries Association, was because I was really concerned that farmers coming into hemp are coming into hemp. They're not coming into agriculture, so to speak. There's in my mind, there's no such thing as a hemp farmer or a corn farmer or a bean farmer. We need diversified farms. And I saw a huge opportunity for hemp to fill that role. And then I saw a huge opportunity to help shape how we educate farmers and communities on about how this could be built out in a sustainable and ecological way that, created jobs and put that employment and tax revenue back. I studied under the Wendell Berry farming program, so I've always joked that my favorite poem is the contrariness of the mad farmer, right? He's talking about going against the grain, and in the essay that Wendell's writing about the mistrust of movements, he's talking about it, the fact that everything is connected, right? It's this agrarian principle that we're all connected. So you can't really have a movement for hemp, right? Because that's not really a movement, right? Why do we want hemp? Well, I'm not involved with hemp because I want hemp. I just said I'm involved with hemp because I want my kids to go to a quality school, and I want to have quality services in my community. I want to regenerate the land and capture carbon, right? That's what my movement, right? But those aren't singular. Those are all interconnected. And the hemp plant, to assume that this plant is a singular movement is to really limit it. And so I think that, I always say I try not to be a part of any movement, but figure out how to support all movements, because I think that, we have to look at things as a whole, and we don't do that a lot. And I think movements sort of put us into linear paths, so. You know, I came by it accidentally, right? I guess. I mean, the sort of my agrarian, you know, background. I think when I left my previous profession and sort of took off to find something else, did my own little version of soul searching, you know, to figure out what I really wanted to do, because I realized that in my profession, my success was predicated upon me taking advantage of someone else, you know, whether well-intentioned or not. And so I got pretty frustrated, and I read an essay by Wendell Berry called Racism in the Economy. And I was going through some personal stuff too at the time I read this, and the essay really had a huge impact on me. And I mean, in the essay, he's basically saying that we're all slaves, you know, and I could relate to that, because I was a slave to all these nice things that my success had bought me, you know, and I had to keep paying for those. And so it's this idea that as soon as there's something that is beneath me to do, that I have to pay somebody to do, then I'm participating in subjugation, because I'm saying that this work is beneath me. It's beneath me to be a plumber, right? I mean, I've done my own plumbing now, and I will never bitch about a plumbing bill again, you know, but I know that, you know, so, I mean, so when I started looking at it like that, I really started just trying to figure out what I was gonna do. And I wanted to figure out how I could use my voice for something better than what I was, you know. And I landed in Kentucky because I had some family here that I was visiting, and I met my wife. You know, I'd always sort of worked in, I guess, agriculture, but not, you know, fisheries or, you know, forestry or those types of jobs, but never really on a farm outside of my family's subsistence farm when I grew up. And I met my wife at that point, and I was actually going to Arizona to, I had a buddy that had a rafting company out there, and I was gonna go do some cooking on the side of the river and drink some beer or whatever, you know, and find myself or lose myself, whichever is more appropriate, you know. Yeah, I never made it out there because I met my wife, and we started dating. And then one day, I think it's really funny because I do have all these deep, you know, philosophical leanings, and I work with amazing people that have all these amazing reasons why they got into agriculture and food systems, and I'm not, you know. I was looking for something to do. I found, you know, 12 years ago, and I found an internship on Craigslist, an organic farm, and now a good friend of mine, Carl Benson from Vermont, who'd moved over there, and I went over to look at the internship because it included housing and some other stuff, and Melinda went over with me at the time, and I was like, that's kind of cool, I could do it, you know. When we got back in the truck, I was talking with Melinda about it, and she said, I asked her what she thought, and she said, I think farmers are sexy. And so I was like, oh, I'll take the gig, you know. And that was how it started, you know. And then Carl was a big fan of Wendell Berry, and so he gave me more of Wendell Berry's books, and I started reading more. And then when his agriculture and farming program opened up in college, I took my VA benefits and went to college and studied under it. So I mean, I sort of came to it just thinking, you know, it sort of came naturally, right? I mean, I come from this place that I tried so hard to get away from, right? I mean, I come from a farm like this, you know, it's in New England, but, you know, and my whole family lived there, and for you know, most of my childhood, I thought I was poor, and I was trying to get out of there, and it was this perception. And so I think that it just makes you think, you know, what does independence mean? What does it really mean to live? I mean, we're all interconnected, and that's how we raise our kids, right? I mean, our you know, son's a little acolyte of St. Francis, the Lord's in everything, and, everything is good, and we have a responsibility to care for it and nurture it. And I mean, it just was a natural fit. And then to go into that program and to study under, Dr. Baines, and that's how I met Sean too. Sean was actually one of my professors in 2015. And so that just really shaped me, coming in from the literary side, versus just the farming side, because by the time I started studying agriculture on a, like in a, I guess what you would call a constructed educational format, I mean, I already had the practical farming skills. So more of my focus was on leadership and community development. I wanted to make sure that if I built this farm, my kids wouldn't feel like I did, that they were poor and that they had to be bussed into places to, to access services, right? So, I mean, and I think that becomes very philosophical. It's not an economic thing. It's really philosophical, and it speaks to how we have or have not adapted to this rapid pace of change, right? I mean, Alvin Toffler writes about it, right? I mean, this pace of change is, human beings aren't made to deal with this. And so the crisis that we face on all fronts, and this goes back to our root of what's my movement, right? I mean, this is a social and philosophical problem that we're facing right now. It's not, land use, child labor, all these things are at the core about our value system. And so that's a philosophical thing. That's not something I can change by growing a plant. I can change hearts and feed minds and an open dialogue, but the real challenges that we face as a society and culture are philosophical and value driven, right? And value in all sense of the meanings, right? Personal, economic, what is wealth? We were joking earlier. Well, what do you mean by money? Am I gonna get my money's worth? Well, define money, So I think that it's just natural for me to think about it philosophically, because the problems aren't structural and they aren't policy. Yeah, well, I think when you want to look at how small farms impact rural communities, we don't have to go back too far back to tobacco, right? I mean, if we go back 20 years and we look at how the Burley Co-op impacted these communities right now, we have a lot of food insecurity, right? I mean, my closest grocery store is a Family Dollar. I mean, I'm not against the family. I think it's great for the town. I'm excited that it happened. It has meaning. But, we don't have grocery stores, but if you think about 20 years ago, farmers in this area, this farm had a 3-acre tobacco base. So I knew, even if I had my job at the university and, other things going on, I knew that if I put that 3-acre base in, I was guaranteed to make a couple extra $1,000 for Christmas or vacation next spring or whatever. So I would plant that tobacco. Secondarily, I would plant, an acre of corn, an acre of beans, melons, whatever the hell I wanted to plant. And most of that food would be sold, in the back of a truck or bartered with family or any of that. But when the guaranteed income stopped, the tractors turned off. And now, 25 years later, we're food insecure. And you can't find fresh food. You can find fresh food up the hill, but it's trucked in from Florida and Georgia. And that's the impact. So then when those farms' tractors turns off, your tractor store closes. Your hardware store closes. We got, 3 years ago, we had 4 hardware stores in this town. Now we have 2. We're gonna have 1. That's what happens. It's a ripple effect. And then there's less money for schools. And, my town lost its school 20 years ago, right after the tobacco buyouts, because there wasn't tax revenue. It's cyclical. So if you have small, diversified farms, I mean, not only are they protecting your natural resources, right? Because at the end of the day, I guess I should say from my perspective, our biggest value is our natural resource base, right? And so small farms protect your natural resource base. They diversify your local food system. You know, I mean, there's only, you know, so many varieties of corn. I mean, I don't know the numbers, but 70 or 80% of the corn can't be more than 3 or 4 varieties that are grown in this country. You know, so we're a pest away from a food crisis, you know, and I mean, having diversified farms that can fill in those gaps, protect the land, and create jobs, I mean, that's what's important. I think that there's a lot of challenges with hemp right now, but I think it's my personal feeling that the biggest challenge that all of the sectors face and what we're dealing with right now is how we manage expectations, you know, for farmers, for growers, for processors, for end users, for everything, right? I mean, we spent a lot of time talking about what this crop could do, right? And all of those were best case scenarios down the road. I mean, those, you know, the numbers, the potential, all of that, it requires growth. And so when we were trying to, you know, get the laws passed and allow for production, we did a really good job of selling best case scenario, right? But what we haven't done since then is step back and really help try to manage those expectations. Now, yeah, this could be a 6, 7, 20, $300 billion industry, but it's not gonna happen tomorrow. And there's still a lot of hurdles to be faced. There's a lot of growth, and there's a lot of legislative challenges, there's a lot of processing challenges, so that's why I feel like you know, not to cut right into the movement thing, but I mean, that's why I feel like this, you know, the opportunity that the HIA is in right now is at a critical point, right? Because we need somebody to really step up and help make, you know, true, honest connections and start painting a realistic picture of what this industry is gonna look like. You know, we know the potential's there. It's undoubted. I mean, if there was no potential there, you wouldn't have the people that have, you know, most of the people in this industry are really smart, hard workers, you know. So I feel like managing expectations is the biggest challenge that we face at this point. Managing expectations, but also maintaining the excitement, right? Because this is a really exciting time, but nobody's getting rich tomorrow. No farmers are retiring. I mean, you know, processors are struggling. I mean, I own part of a processing company and we're having a hard time, you know. I mean, it's systemic, and it's, you know, it's because we didn't set proper expectations. I mean, I think there's good and bad with this mentality, right? I mean, it's great that we're getting farmers coming to land, but, you know, it's great that investments coming into rural communities, right? I mean, we've been able to drive, you know, economic revenue into our community here with both jobs and, you know, tourism and things of that nature. You know, it's happening, you know, and that's, so we do need people to realize that it requires investment. But I think there is, yeah, it's huge expectation that people were going to make so much money off CBD, you know, that it's, you know, you could, I mean, we still talk to farmers that are going to grow indoors, you know, and well, where's the price? You know, we've seen a, 600 or 700% price collapse. You know, the potential's there for the market, but the reality is that you know, we built an industry based on a scarcity model, right? It did hurt us, right? I mean, we definitely overproduced. We expected positive, you know, legislation quickly, you know, but once this becomes a food ingredient, you know, and the FDA steps out of the way on that, then this large-scale production that we're seeing in some of these larger ag states is going to take off, and farmers are going to realize, you know, a higher revenue per acre But the reality is it can't be singular, right? I mean, we can't come in and say, all right, we got to grow hemp. We've got to have a long-term solution, right? Or farmers are just going to keep growing. So we have to be able to say, well, you can grow hemp and then follow it with wheat for this market, and you can grow that. So I mean, just this idea that you can only grow CBD and that one, you know, it's the one crop that's going to save the farm. I mean, there is no panacea. You know, you can't grow cannabis in the same, I mean, I guess you can grow cannabis in the same field twice, you know, back to back, but I certainly wouldn't. And I think most, you know, smart farmers wouldn't. But there is no one solution, right? This is a great tool, but that's it. I mean, this is a tool in the toolbox. This is something, yeah, it can replace plastic, but you know, at the end of the day, if you're making a plastic water bottle, you know, from hemp, yeah, that's wonderful, but you're still raping or pillaging an aquifer, and you're still trucking water. So this goes back to movements, right? So then what did you really do? Did you really help fix anything? Oh, you removed 1% of, you know, the waste from the supply chain. So it's just a tool. A very useful tool with a plethora of benefits. It's easy to grow, but it's not going to happen quick. That's a pretty complex, you know, thing to unpack, how we got away from diversified farms. But I think, you know, the biggest, you know, we had the get big, get out, get bigger, get out mentality after World War II. And, you know, you know, all of the chemicals from World War II shifted over to agriculture. Seed breeding companies started breeding seeds and creating less work, you know, for farmers, right? Being able to spray an herbicide or a pesticide to eradicate something is, I mean, I'm not gonna lie, if it didn't hurt the planet, I'd love that shit, you know? I mean, but it's, I mean, it's, from my perspective, it's not healthy. I know there's a debate somewhere about it, but, so, I mean, it just became economy, right? I mean, they commoditized food, for better or worse, right? I mean, it became a commodity that was traded in bulk. And when things get traded in bulk, you know, farmers have no control over essentially which direction they go, right? So you had to get big or get out. So you saw this massive wave of farm losses in the 80s. I mean, when I was born, we had, what, 7 or 8 million farms in the 70s. We've got just over 1 million now. You know, 85 or 90% of our food's probably grown by 6 or 7 farms. You know, I mean, half the organic cherry tomatoes come from one farm in California. You know, I mean, it just became economics, you know. You know, once it became a commodity, you had to be fast, efficient, you know, because of shipping, food had to be standardized, so they started breeding seeds to make them more perfect and more uniform, and it took us a while to get here, you know, although not really if you think about it from the perspective of the Neolithic agricultural revolution, right? I mean, it took us, what I gotta do some math, like 16,000 years to get here, you know, and it took us 50 to get, you know, to here, I guess. So it was just really, you know, it was just this idea that we had to move people off the farm to get them into factories because, you know, the primary goal became economic growth, you know, continual growth. And that model started showing up in cities and factories, and then it translated into farms, and that's how we ended up with these huge monocultures that, you know, they have to exist. I mean, that's kind of thing. You just snap your finger and they're going to go away, because if they do that, then you just killed a whole bunch of people, you know, and caused a whole bunch of other problems. But I think, you know, we're seeing it, right? I mean, I was joking, you know, last night with you guys. I said, you know, there was that Hunter Thompson. It was Hunter Thompson. I looked it up. He wrote, when the going gets weird, the weird go pro. And I'm like, a decade ago, people used to laugh at me around here. Now I got people I don't know pulling in my driveway trying to buy food locally, So I think, out of out of crisis, breeds necessity. And we're starting to see more people thinking, well, why am I getting my food from California? And how safe is that, right? So I think we have these two great opportunities. We have hemp, which again, instituted in in an equitable, in this area, like in an equitable burley tobacco cooperative with a couple other crops, could really turn these local economies around and get these farms producing. I mean, we have to protect this land, right? I mean, the people around me, if they don't have any value in their land, and I mean, I get offers to cut my land all the time, and I can tell you it's pretty attractive, if I didn't care about a tree. So you have to find ways to make land economically productive, and I think the way you do that is using this plant and diversified farms. We have to break the food cycle. I mean, it's just too insecure. We've seen it right now. We're seeing it right now, and this isn't even a friggin' crisis. This is like baby steps to a real problem, and we already have a food crisis. Whether we're talking about state or federal, I think that they're driven by a disconnect. I mean, I really do. I mean, I think that if, legislators and policymakers and these people were on these farms and living, in these communities, it would be really easy to understand why, a simple policy could be a huge barrier to someone like me living in this. I mean, it changes in the Food Safety Modernization Act, required a $15,000 investment in my farm. Am I more safe? I mean, potentially, but I mean, so I think that, there's just a disconnect. And I don't say that to be disrespectful, to say that our legislators don't understand their constituency, because I think most of them by and large listen and care. But I think that it's really hard in the 3 to 4 minutes that you have to convey your message to them to say, this is why this little thing is so important, and I think that's it. I think a lot of it is that. It's just misinformation, people with more money and bigger voices, because, again, our policymakers are just disconnected. I don't think there's any big conspiracy or anything mischievous. I just think that, some voices are easier to hear than others. And, it's one thing to show up and visit on a farm for an hour, but, I think it's another thing to be on a farm for a day and to see and understand how policy could be changed to make us better stewards of our community, right? I mean, there are barriers, there are legislative barriers, not even in cannabis, or hemp, that could change locally, that would give me access to a huge market, So I think that, just doing a quick visit is cool, and we love to have you, but, come spend a day and really, understand the challenges that, small farmers face. I mean, not to say, I have nothing against big, large, conventional commodity farmers. I'm not out to take anybody down, but it's very different than what you're seeing here, with very different goals, and I think policy affects farmers like me on a different scale, and it's not one size fits all, and that's basically what we have. I think that, this is hey, baby, this is an exciting time, right? I think in the industry, but more importantly for the HIA, there's a lot of really exciting things happening, and membership should be excited. I think that over the next few weeks, there's going to be more information coming out. We're all in this together, and I think, regardless of who I talk to on the phone, 90% of the time I agree with everything membership says, whether it's a complaint or a compliment. you know. But I also think that it takes time to create systemic change. And we spent a certain amount of time as an organization with a pretty singular focus. And then we haven't made the best transition into the next phase, which is, well, it's mostly legal now. So how are we transitioning our organization to serve our members now? Because most of our members are leaders in this industry as it grows. And so, I mean, I think it's an exciting time because the members have a chance to have feedback into how we're moving forward. Everybody is really excited to help get us to the next level. We just have to figure out what that is in a lot of ways. I mean, we've got some work to do. The unique thing about the thing that I like about the HIA, the Hemp Industries Association, is it's got this history, right? I mean, it's 20 plus years, and within this history there are so many smart and educated people, that know so much. I mean, I've only been involved in this crop since 2013, right? I mean, there's people that have been doing this since the early 90s and before. And so, I mean, to look back and think that the Hemp Industries Association has this legacy and this support network, that resource base that we have is a tremendous asset to our members, and that's how we're gonna drive information and resources to our members. We have a responsibility because we have that history. I mean, we're the organization that got us to this point, and now it's time to take that step forward and start using the network and the resources and the experts that we have within our membership to bring everybody together to figure out the best path forward for this plant in I guess not just in even American ag economies, but right in global ag economies, because we work internationally. So most of the educational goals that we have, I mean, some of them require back-end work, websites and information for that. But I think by and large, the thing that I'm most excited about, and what gets me most excited about the work with the HIA, is when you're able to connect members that are able to close loops or answer questions for other members. So I think the biggest and quickest thing that we can do is figure out how to create a forum that allows our members to effectively and actively communicate with each other, and also to figure out, I'm excited about our committee work that's coming up. I mean, being able to leverage members, to showcase the members, resources in business while they're teaching other members how to do a specific portion of the business, and making sure we're all responsibly growing together, I don't know, I guess that's how we do it. Hemp, it's everything.